Lucid listens deeper. Welcome to the new studio. Filmmaking in the age of AI.
Hey, this is Joshua Edjida. Welcome to the new studio, the Lucid Filmmaking Podcast. Today's guest I'm really honored to have here. This is Brooks Elms. He is a 30-year veteran of the filmmaking and Los Angeles screenwriting space, and he's written 45 plus screenplays. He's sold a dozen. He's an awesome coach. We get a lot out of this conversation. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And at the end, I'll let him speak more about what ways that you can connect with him if you want to. And I actually went ahead after the recording of this podcast, and I joined his screenwriting group. And it's a school group. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. And go ahead and enjoy the podcast. It's a great conversation. We get into some really deep stuff. Okay, see you on the other side. So welcome, Brooks. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. I am feeling really good about being here.
Yeah, it's exciting. I've been only connected with you for a couple days. I was like, okay, gotta connect with this guy because he's like speaking the same language, and it doesn't come around very often. The first thing that I want to say is I get the sense that the people you're working with, I think you have like a group meetings and stuff. The people that you're working with are probably they probably feel very lucky to have a space where something deeper is being revealed to them instead of just the same old writer's tactics. So if you could say something about that.
Yeah. The people that are drawn to me are really drawn to identity transformation. Mm-hmm. So I was teaching at UCLA Extension for a few years, and I loved talking shop, and it was fine. But I realized that it was sort of surface, technical stuff, and it just was it was kind of stale compared to the work I was doing in my men's group, which is very deep, primal exploration of like what's really going down in your life. And so I said, well, and at that point I'd been doing it for 20 years, and I was like, I've been, without realizing it, basically training to be a life coach anyway. And so I was like, what if I take what I do as a professional screenwriter and open up a coaching practice and become a life coach for screenwriters? And so I just put the word out, and people started coming to me because, on one sense, I teach the craft at a professional level, but like, why didn't they just learn that on their own? Exactly. Or even some of the people, like I have one client who had already been to USC's graduate film program, and he still came to me. And then after that, he got nominated for an Oscar this year. So like there's something that goes on at a deeper level beyond the technical things that, because there's so many doubts. It's such a hyper-competitive business. And if you can minimize the self-inflicted wounds or the ones that are just taking you out of the game because of really insecurity or overcorrection or undercorrection, and just then you actually have a fighting chance of succeeding. So you have to you have to enjoy it and stay in the game long enough just so that the odds are in your favor. And then you have to, make reasonable strategic decisions. And that's hard to do with the identity we grew up with as a kid. Oh, Hollywood's for other people. I'm an outsider. I'm not good enough. And we all intellectually know that's BS, but we all actually live our life with those limited identities. So in the process of developing a new screenplay, so that's like the outcome. They want a professional level screenplay, but the real juice is the identity transformation by just hanging out with a professional level screenwriter and in the nuances of the system, and then meeting each of these doubts along the way and having a blast. Like, it's not like therapy where you're there crying all the time, but it absolutely is therapeutic, because if we're not grabbing the lantern and going to the deep, dark places, what the hell are you writing about? So it's kind of like the best parts of therapy and the best parts of film school.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really well said. I think when I was connecting with you, I think I wrote this kind of central thing that I operate on, which is like a writer can only write a transformation that they themselves are willing and able to experience or that they have experienced. And I think that's another way of saying this.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and I think you're right as long as we're looking at it metaphorically, right? So you take Shawshank Redemption and Frank Darabont, right? Obviously, he was never in jail. He never had to break out of jail. He never, got accused of murder. But like, he's lived in Hollywood, so it feels kind of like that. So if you know the metaphor, and he knows, and I don't know how consciously he was like, this is like what went down for me in second grade or whatever, and then like most people don't so specifically make those connections. I do in my own work and when I help people because it just makes it more vivid. But he obviously intuitively, Shawshank is not about a prison. It's about the limited prison that Frank Darabont had in his mind. Well, first Stephen King had in his mind, and then Darabont, and he was able. And there was a emotional truth of how you hope in the face of like deep despair that he was true to. So I would say that you have to have an awareness of your emotional transformation and see it as it's almost like reasonably heroic. Like you can't exist without going through transformation and facing despair and hope. And you have to understand that at once it's both mundane and heroic. And really good storytellers can understand both of them at the same time. Like they can see things in a legendary way, even though it's what everybody does. But you have to be able to see it that way. One other specific example about this, and my best friend on the NYU soccer team had an amazing ability to legendize the other people on the team. So let's say there's one guy in the team who's just boring as F. Like just, you sit next to him on the van, he's like, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh man, this sucks. But the way my friend would talk about it, he would make the guy legendary in his boringness. And then would talk, and then it made the whole thing. It was almost like he would cartoonize, and it was such a beautiful way of sort of perceiving things. Or another guy who was like a complainer, and you're like, oh God, it's an asshole. But then when my friend would sort of talk about the legendary complaining that this guy did, it became, oh, that's actually kind of fun. He just embraced the character, antagonism of these people as a legendary sort of, and then it would transform something that was kind of crappy or annoying to something that was actually kind of delightfully annoying.
Totally, yeah, and that's another way of the way that I understand that what you're saying is what transformation is like we're transforming our relationship to the wound. And so, like, you gave an example here of like this really wounded person who's like just complaining all the time. But if you like what you resist persists. So if you're resisting that guy, then it creates a really low level relationship. But if you embrace whatever that is, then you have magic.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when I'm at my best, just as a human being, whether I'm coaching somebody or with my wife, or I coach kids in basketball and stuff, and I can really just be present and see them as a legend in the moment.
Yeah.
It feels so good to me, especially when it's somebody who I'm putting judgments on. Oh, this person should be blah, 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 or whatever. And if I can catch myself sort of with those judgments and then shift it to like, no, it's perfect the way it is. Or myself, like my own limitations or struggles, if I can see them like as a beautiful, legendary unfolding of my character journey in the universe, and it's not supposed to be any different than it actually is. That's when things get really good, even when they're kind of dark or daunting or challenging.
Yeah, totally. So, do you mind if I ask, you're married and you have kids, and like how long you've been married?
Yeah, I came to Hollywood in 2002. met my wife a few years after that. So we've been married about 20 years.
Yeah.
I have an older son who is 19, between his freshman and sophomore year of college at Long Beach, and another son who's 17, who's going to be a junior at
Wow.
Agora High School.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any kids, and I just got married last or this recent December. Yeah, thanks. And I bring this up because there is something so relational about writing. And the more we have, and I'd be curious about your thoughts on this, the more we have experienced and overcome and got perspective about ourselves through relationship, the more we can accurately portray that in writing. And so somebody who doesn't have any relationship experience, their writing is going to kind of reflect that.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing about that sort of, yeah, so, well, we all have relationship experience. It's our awareness around the relationship experience we have.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed in my 20s, because at that point I'd been to NYU Film School, I was hung out with so many filmmakers and kind of found out the person, saw their work, back and forth, bum, bum, bum. And so I was probably mid 20s, and I saw this filmmaker introduce her film and at some screening, and I was 20 seconds into listening to her talk. I go, oh, I know what her film is going to feel like based on the energy, the way that she was talking, and I'm probably not going to be crazy about it. Isn't that interesting? And so I think, and that's the way that she relates to, like, she was communicating. You know, think 20 seconds, how could you know? But like, when you have enough experience with filmmakers and their films and you go back and forth, I mean, at this point, I have peers who have made stuff, you know, everybody's heard of, and then, you know, and everything in between. And just to see, it's the same thing. Like, the stuff I saw them do in film school and the stuff I've seen them do on 5,000 screens, I still see them in it. And so you there's just in 20 seconds in a high pressure thing like giving an introduction at a screening, they're just making lots of choices where you intuitively go, ooh, like they've got their point of view dialed in, it's precise, it's confident, and it's whatever, and like I'm in for a ride, or it's mushy and whatever. And I'm not even saying they have to be like totally confident. Like, one of the things I heard people that like work with Scorsese, he talks fast, he's nervous, like I don't even know what, like he's got this sort of almost frantic, but it comes from a place of exploration and authenticity where you're like, this guy's a jabbermouth, but like he's electric, and I can't wait to hear what comes next. Same thing with Tarantino, like where there's other people who are kind of babbling and it's word salad, and you know, and you're like. And that's fine. Like, I have no judgment about that. But I'm probably like, if they're word salading in 20 seconds, almost certainly it's going to be a 90-minute word salad experience. And I haven't found that disproven yet, where somebody was kind of very awkward in a 20-second intro and the movie was a banger. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is huge. What you're saying right now could take someone years to unpack, because it's really back to the question of identity and how deep does identity go, you know, because it's not just, you know, what side of the political spectrum we're on or what side of the city we live on. It's so deep, and in my experience, it accumulates physiologically in the belly, and it's way deeper than our conscious mind can comprehend. So when someone really is struggling with their writing process and it's coming from an unconscious identity, my question as a person who works with subconscious stuff also, how do you gently make someone aware of something that they're going to probably have some hurt feelings or resistance about, accepting?
It's a really good question, and there's a few assumptions in there that make it complicated. So the first is this humility, like, I don't know. Like, you and I probably know, but the truth is, even when we think we know, we're usually right, we might be wrong. And so holding that humility in, which is hard sometimes because you've seen it a million times, you're like, almost certainly it's this. But we have to go like, and I could be wrong. Like even that thing I said before about the filmmaker that introduces a film, I haven't seen contrary evidence of that yet, but I could. Like it's not so if I'm with somebody and I feel like they're not being authentic at the level that they could be, and I have a hunch of what it might be, the number one thing I intend to do is stay humble, because even though I have a hunch, my hunch could be wrong. And so that, if I'm able to hold that alone makes them feel safe, because now we're genuinely discovering it together, not like I'm the guru that has the answers. So that's number one. And then I'm just offering. Here's a different way to think about it. So one of my favorite, because I'm an athlete too, and a huge fan of like great coaches. And one of my favorite coaches was the North Carolina women's coach, this guy Anson Dorrance. And one of the things he did that was so brilliant is he just measured everything. And so, how they do on headers, how they do on crosses, how they do on 1v1s, all these things. Cool. And so then he puts the data out, and these are really competitive people, puts a big board, and based on the stats, you're ranked number 1 or 2 or 3, and none of them wanted to be on the bottom. And then he comes along and says, here's the data. I'm going to help you do whatever you can that's in your control to move up that board based on the data. So it's not him deciding what their issue is. It's like saying, hey, if you want to objectively move up the board, I'm going to try to coach you up that way. So that's what I try to do. And so that's where developing a screenplay is really wonderful for somebody when I'm coaching them, because we've got concrete data. And I can, in shorthand go, hey, this log line, I'm confused and it doesn't feel as compelling as it could be. I could be wrong. I could be not in that thing, but let's play with it. Or best case scenario is I take myself out of it. I go, let's let your audience, let's literally create a clip of this, put it in front of your audience and see if it blows up. And if it doesn't, why is that happening? And so I love it being between my client and the data, and then I'm a support person. So I'm not the one being judge and jury, because who gives a crap what I think? I'm there in support of their journey. So, and then what happens is, if I'm right about that hunch that they're kind of withholding, probably because they're afraid to be vulnerable about a doubt or a fear or a limited belief, it surfaces on its own based on the data reflected to them. And then I can support them through it. So, for example, let's say they had a vague log line, and I'd say, well, usually my trust is really deep because I create a safe space and I can just say it. But if for whatever reason they were like, no, I think it's work. I go, great, well, let's test it. And then it goes out, and then the audience is like, this is, or I could be wrong, but the audience will say, we don't get it. Like, what is it? And then it gets surfaced where it actually matters. And then I go, well, here's why I think they might have thought it was vague, because this, and that. So I have all the professional screenwriting technical stuff there to get in. But the deeper work is them as a human being just going through their own doubts and insecurities and really softening those limiting beliefs, because anybody can tell stories and anybody can learn to tell them at a professional level if you stay with it, if you get good reps with good feedback loops.
Yeah, really well said. One thing that I'm really appreciating from what you're saying is you value the craft, like any screenwriter has to value the craft, but so much screenwriting is only the craft. And so when you're able to have the professional ability to do the craft as like the baseline, and then building on that everything else that really is what a movie is about anyway, because a movie is about transformation anyway. And, it can happen with a variety of characters and a variety of.
Well, I would push back a little bit. That I think transformation. It's a great question, especially for somebody like you in your audience. So, transformation is what we're really, I think, doing is the intention is to evoke an appealing emotional experience, right? And most times we found over 100 plus years of cinema, because if you think about it, so cinema happens. Also, you can do moving pictures. Why was there not an explosion of just shots of landscapes and stuff? Why did narrative come in and dominate the medium? And it's because what you're saying, transformation hit so deeply in our psyche, and it did in novels and plays before that. So it was a natural thing because it just worked. It gives people an emotional experience that helps them feel seen and heard and connected, and it's so powerful. So technically, you could have, so you look at Andy Warhol's Empire State Building movie, which was just 7 hours of a shot of Empire State Building or something like that. There's no narrative. The transformation in that is actually in the viewer going, what the hell am I watching it? No, it's kind of interesting. No, I'm bored stiff. No, now I'm fascinated. It's whatever they're bringing to it. So the transformation happens there. But it's ultimately, transformation is sort of like the delivery mechanism for them to feel and think a pleasant pattern of thoughts. Now, genre comes in because it's like, if it's horror, the appealing set of emotions is mostly going to be fear. With thriller, it's tension. With comedy, it's, humor. So for us as craftspeople, what I find most important is define the emotion that you're intending, knowing that you may or may not get it, but you're intending for them to laugh at your comedy. One of my favorite clients has a line on his social media. He's like, I write comedy. Unless you don't think it's funny, then I write drama. Anyway, but so the intent, but so you want the intention out there, and then the mechanism to get to for them to feel the thing you're hoping that they feel. Narrative is the best way to do it, and oftentimes it's a giant change with the hero, but sometimes if it's action, there's very little change, right? There's just, Indiana Jones is pretty much the same as the beginning and the end, so is James Bond or whatever. The change in those things happen the mission to save the world, where they were in peril and then they get saved. So it's kind of like the change happens out there. But there's some sort of, to your point, transformation, because that delivers the emotion and the insights that we like so much, that allows us to feel connected. So we're in agreement here. I was just trying to set some distinctions about how it happens.
Yeah, great. What's really, I kind of want to dig into the conversation about the emotion, because it's a really, for a lot of people, very ambiguous, hard to define point about evoking feelings, because it's very it could be different for everybody. And the thing that I've been working in transform. I went to film school. I had a production company, and then I took a break from film industry, and I did transformational coaching for 10 years. And the thing about emotions is we can feel them in a way that is indulgent and keeps us cycling, or we can feel them in a way where we're zoomed out a little bit, and then we are more aware, like we're talking about, of our identity and the identity that creates those emotions. And then if we're feeling an emotion while conscious of the identity that created them, getting some distance, then it becomes transformational. And so, to your point about the Empire State Building movie and other, often, in horror movies, often there isn't actually a character transformation, but that kind of movie could potentially, and there are some transformational horror movies, create a transformation in the audience because of what the characters refuse to bend on.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, horror is an interesting genre because you're like, who the hell wants to feel fear? And I
Yeah.
definitely have noticed that, like, there were times in my life where I was more down with horror than other times.
Yeah.
But then a movie like Get Out comes along, and it kind of goes beyond just the horror experience. It's
Yeah, I need to see that. I keep meaning to see that.
it's well, I'm of the mindset that I never like to recommend movies. Like, I trust. I have a weird thing. I'm like overly rebellious about that. I hated in school when they would assign a book or a movie, even in film
Yeah.
school, where I was,
Cool. Yeah.
when I was assigned a movie or whatever. I mean, I don't let people tell me what to do.
Sure.
So I certainly would never say you should, see this or whatever. And if you instinctively are drawn to Get Out,
Yeah.
you'll probably get what you think you're going to get out of it. I think it's generally acclaimed, from my perspective, in about the right way. It's not the best thing ever, but there's some really
Sure.
good thinking, and it's a fun horror stuff too.
Cool.
It's okay. But back to this idea of transformation, because you said a lot of interesting things there. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure where to go with it. So
Yeah, take your
go to
time.
your
It's
next
all good.
question.
Yeah.
Well, I would just start rambling. So, okay, let's do the next
okay.
question.
Okay, yeah. So one of the studies that I've done, I told you about my 5 levels of the 5 lucid levels for depth of transformation in filmmaking, and it's basically most of the time a filmmaker has to have consciously mastered a higher level to be able to write at that level. However,
Yeah.
there are some cases where that's not true. Like David Lynch, for example, was kind of channeling higher levels than he had consciously mastered, because he would kind of go up and down in his levels as like evidence that sometimes it was on, sometimes it was off. And
How are you
Yeah.
how are you defining that? Like, to me, if somebody's going to create a piece of art or tell a story,
yeah,
and they're going to go from A to B in a transformation, they must have
Yeah.
some sense of that transformation. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if I, at a given point in my life, told a story that had this amazing transformation and whatever, that I'm always going to be in that end state, like, so I'm curious about how you're discerning where David Lynch was in his life and how that would reflect on how he could tell a transformation story.
Yeah. Well, especially like I think it was his first or one of his first movies, Eraserhead.
Mm-hmm.
It scores higher on the lucid scale than someone, I think he was in his 20s, than someone in their 20s would normally be capable of scoring. And so it was like channeled from dream stage or whatever, and it wasn't really articulate enough to make logical sense, but it still moved the energy in a way that was kind of made him a famous filmmaker.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So I would then, I mean, if you look at, I think was it Beethoven or Mozart, one of those people who was like a phenom at like age 5, right? And created this amazing symphony. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, the 5-year-old doesn't have any sort of maturity in their experience.
Yeah.
But assuming that was true, and I don't think there's people that dispute it,
Yeah.
I think what happens is, we have 50,000 thoughts a day. Infants have 50,000 thoughts. And so as we, by the time you're even 5, you have tremendous experience to relate to, at least in terms of what you like or what you don't like. And somebody like that, who was some sort of savant in terms of awareness of feelings or whatever, was just able to, put it together in composing a symphony that was so, he had seen enough of life even in 5 years to make something that was transcendent. So, and you see it a lot, even, you've seen it a lot definitely since the 50s in, teenage musicians, or Elvis or the Beatles or whatever. These are people who are 15, 16, 17, and they're creating anthemic music where it's like, so, it's an interesting question because what we're talking about, I think, is pretty fascinating. It's writing what you know, but in a really sort of nuanced psychological perspective. But I think it's people. I guess what I'm probably arguing for here, or trying to make a distinction of, is that at a core level, in one sense, humans know way more than we give them credit for. It's one of the things I feel frustrated about the school system, is that it's this based on this assumption where a 5-year-old can't discern what they need to learn in life. And I think that's a fundamentally false belief. And when you tell kids what to do, study this in this order, I think it stifles our much more profound potential for saying, no, I'm fascinated by this in this order with these people and need mentorship along that path, not one that the state forces on me and everybody in the same way. It's too restrictive. But people go, at 5, you don't know what the hell you want. Like at 5, I just wanted to, coloring books all day long. And I'm like, great. Like, trust that kid to kind of go through that phase and then maybe become an artist, or maybe become a whatever, or maybe be like, this sucks, I want to be an accountant. But like any path, as long as they're supportive, not like abandoned on the street, I think that humans innately have curiosity and are insatiable learners as a default setting. And the only reason we don't do that, and then obviously cover reading, writing, and math, because they're so obviously helpful in terms of how you exist in the world. You don't need to force people. It's like you don't have to force people to eat ice cream, and you don't need to force people to learn reading, writing, and math, because they're obviously gateways to awesomeness. So back to like, how do you write what you know? I think we do know profound life lessons even at age 5 or 6. Almost nobody can beautifully articulate it like some geniuses can at those ages. Most of us take 10,000 hours of, and even those people, I would imagine that 5-year-old probably had pretty damn close to 10,000 hours. Like, I don't know what was going on, but like, he probably was doing nothing but, composing stuff, so, and I'm sure the Beatles or all those guys were like 18, like Mr. Beast was hanging out with his buddies all day long, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, for years on end, studying, like breathing YouTube. So he had 10,000 hours of that new media experience before he blew up at like late teens or 20s. So, you need quality reps, and you need people, and you need time on task. And then you just start to organically, set yourself apart from other people, because you're just thinking about it more than other people.
Yeah, exactly. And feeling into it, because another way of what we're talking about is like the depth at which you know yourself, right?
Yeah.
So we put this in a few different terminologies. Your relationship to the wound, how much you know yourself, how many reps you've had in the arena, and what it actually means to you, and how that changes your identity. Like, this is kind of like a bit of the same thing said in different ways.
Well, let me make a distinction there, because it was really interesting. You talked about the depth of how well somebody, the depth of their self-knowledge versus
Yeah.
how well they know themselves. I think it's an important distinction because I've run
Yeah.
across a few professional level athletes in my day.
Cool.
And as a lifelong athlete I played like Division III soccer,
Okay.
which is more advanced than most, but several levels, like way beyond. Even at my peak, there were, I don't know, a lot of people that were way better at soccer than I was, right?
Cool.
But I knew enough about the craft of that sport to be struck when I came across professionals. You can see them on interviews or whatever. What's interesting is like, well, how are they perceiving the game versus what I do? And it wasn't that they knew themselves deeper. They actually had, and some of the people that really struck me, they had a simple way of focusing. Like there was a guy who was a legendary, at stealing bases in baseball. And I ran into him I don't know where I saw him. And I was like, hey, what's the secret to stealing bases? And he goes, don't get caught. And he said it obviously in like a silly way or whatever, but like there was something about the energy that he said it, that like he didn't need more. He didn't need the complexity. He didn't need to talk about his mother wound. He didn't need any of that stuff. He just needed like I'm going to run so goddamn fast and not get caught. And that was enough to organize his gifts athletically to be a phenomenal base stealer. And so, and that was it. Like I, as an athlete, was never able to completely simplify in that way. So it's not necessarily the depth. The depth kind of comes from a simplicity sometimes. And I see that all the time with storytellers. We overthink, we overcomplicate. Some people will do, hey, I've got a concept for a movie and it's a love story and it's a horror movie and it's got these funny things or whatever. Like, no. You're actually taking away from the emotional punch by doing more. And if you can simplify around the primal things, then a depth that comes out, but it's not necessarily knowing yourself at a deeper level. It's really knowing when to be simple or still or primary or primal that delivers the bigger impact. And often there is some depth in there, but the depth is really kind of secondary to the how well we know ourselves. So somebody who's actually pretty shallow could create a really beautiful shallow piece of art that could be very popular, and to me that's delightful.
Yeah, and just to that point, there's my wife has been encouraging to give the levels of our system names instead of numbers, so that they're not coming across as hierarchical. Right, because
that's a cool idea.
Because it doesn't need to be a contest. It's more of like, what are you in the mood for? And so,
Beautiful.
So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're shifting. So far, what we have is easy ride is number 1. Familiar is number 2. Something real is number 3. The deep end is number 4, and cosmic is number 5.
Wow, I love that. I think it's really insightful and really smart. It weirdly reminds me of at our wedding. We had people at the wedding, and we had to sit them at different tables. And the first thought was like, table 1, table 2 was like, oh no, we don't want our friends to think of hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly.
So we named our tables like bodies of water: Pacific, Atlantic,
Wow.
Indian.
Yeah.
because there's a weird thing that happens with humans ranking each other or ranking themselves. So I love that insight for those things, because somebody who's deep isn't more or less significant than somebody who's materialistic and shallow.
Right.
Like that's just it. As long as you're happy that way. There's people who are really just sort of light-minded, and that's really cool. And people who are heavy-minded, and that's cool too, if it's aligned with them. If they're materialistic, but they've got deeper things that want to come out, that's the problem. Or if they're like moody and blah 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 blah, but they really just want to have a effing good time, that's a problem too. So it's the integrity of what the sort of harmony of your being wants to be. And then there's a writer who's he's a great writer he's a friend of mine. He's a showrunner and a writer. And I remember he and I got to Hollywood around the same time and hung out. And I remember somebody else talking about a screenplay that he wrote. And she was like, it was like a warm wind. It just was so happy and flowing coming out. And I was like, wow, that's totally different than my down and dark and grounded thing. And I really had admired the lighter energy of it. And he's not a shallow person. He's actually a great storyteller. But he was just tapping into a lighter, more playful energy. And I was like, and as evidenced by this woman who read it and was really speaking so highly of it. And so, to me, that's it. It's so I love that idea of being really sensitive to hierarchy, so that people don't think one's better than the other. And it's really just, which flavor of depth are you interested in?
Yeah, exactly. And I think just kind of reiterating what you just said is like, if somebody wants more depth and they don't know how to do it, that's when this becomes really interesting, right? And that's when they're gonna show up for, some help with that, is because they can feel a unmet need in themselves to express and to alchemize something that they haven't been able to put words to. And so like I said, the levels, the something real at number 3, and the deep end at number 4. And I've been actually mapping out I think you'll find this interesting conversation, is the ROI from the different levels. And level 4 films, the deep end, makes consistently the highest return on investment statistically.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's kind of, one of the really, that's like the selling point, I think, of being able to make a film that really feels like, as a writer, we are investing ourselves into. And for me, in my experience, the key is that I actually transform in the process, and I actually discover something about myself, and I actually give in a way that is at my edge, and I don't know if it's going to be this or that. It might be terrible, or it just feels like I'm passing through, some kind of invisible membrane. And that's what gets me to a space where it feels brand new. It feels fresh, right? And so, yeah, anything that I said, you're welcome to comment on.
Yeah, well, so the personal growth part of it that I think is interesting to talk about is whenever we're moving out of that familiar zone and answering a call to adventure, there's a vulnerability to it. And it's like there's a threshold that needs to be crossed, and often a lot of resistance or that refusal of the call. And I think about that first scene in Star Wars Episode 4, where they're in the cantina, and the energy of that scene is all these weird faces and the music. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful, evocative beginning of the Act 2 New World experience. And I think whether we're writing like heavy drama or whatever, there's that the beginning of the new world is always have those sorts of patterns. And how do we do it? And I'm saying even like the way we like get by our life, like how do we make a living while we're writing screenplays, and how do we, if we're in Hollywood, how do we do deals, like anything that we're actually dealing with, how do we, have relationships with family or whoever, they follow those same sort of patterns. There's a threshold of growth. There's a threshold that sort of is here, and then if it's going to expand the relationship, you have to go to that threshold crossing, and there's vulnerability there because we're familiar with the old way, and then we have to open up to the new way. And so if we can be mindful of what that is and be loving of ourselves and kind and patient, it can be a little more graceful. but the game itself is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell has this great story. Um, he said this undergraduate student, like when he was teaching at Sarah Lawrence, said, Professor Campbell, you don't understand our generation. We've already got everything figured out. And he goes, well, great. The only thing you've missed out on is life. Because that's it. Like we can have it all here, and we can even be like totally present and zen out, whatever. We're still going to face despair. We're still going to face
Yeah.
giant challenges. It's really,
Yeah.
it's like we're gonna be on big ass waves and get wiped out sometimes. It's like how much can we sort of relax and be present for the wipeouts when they happen, and how quickly can we recover and not be like down in the dumps, and you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
so it's that I think there's a resiliency and it's the speed back to sort of equanimity is
Yeah.
really the sort of the test of psychological health, which is difficult when we run into those deep, periods of grief, fear, fury.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And especially making excess meaning and stories about, if I'm feeling this, it means this about me. And, that's where suffering comes in.
Well, yeah, exactly right. Because you're getting back to identity. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
facing these significant challenges and I'm making it about me as opposed to being, a set of particles in the universe,
Yeah,
and it's just
yeah,
what I'm going through. So it's that identity. If we can soften and open our identity, so we're, just like a flower or an idea or a thing in the universe. If we can have that openness of it, then we don't get thrown over the craziness and get too identified. It's the suffering comes from that identity that's really narrow, and seeing myself as not only a human being, but like a filmmaker or a thing or whatever. And all of a sudden they don't say yes to my film, and now I'm nothing. I'm garbage. It's like that's
yeah,
really gonna. It's calcified, narrow identity as opposed to open. But like not like woo, I'm one with the universe, but just like if we look at life, we're a bunch of molecules and particles and energy and flow, and we're a human being, and I've got to eat lunch. Like it's all those
yeah,
things integrated.
yeah.
Um,
And integrated
that,
actually is the key word, right? Because somebody, and I'm just saying this because if there's real people listening and they're taking in this information, it can be very easy, very tempting to kind of wear a different identity as a costume. But that's not it, right? Because
yeah,
just deciding like, oh, I'm this person now, or I'm this person now, if it's not actually integrated into our bodies and we don't fundamentally believe it, then a costume is eventually going to wear out and come off.
yeah. The way I'd say it, and then I do need to get moving, is that costume is perfect for us at Act 1A. And then the
Yeah.
adventure is, hey, by the way, time to remove that mask and then look at the next costume that's underneath that one. They're like, I don't want to. I like this costume. Like, no. You got to pull it off. And they're like, okay, then I'll go on the adventure. And then beginning of Act 2 is like, you've pulled off, mask A or costume A, and then you actually
Yeah.
learn to embrace this new level of costume. And then, of course, underneath that is only another costume. It's like an onion.
Exactly. Yeah. Wonderfully put. Yeah. Well, so as we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share about, like maybe how people could get a hold of you, or what anything you have coming up?
Yeah, there's two ways. One is if people are really turned on by what I'm saying and have significant, they're just ready to do a deep dive as a screenwriter and become a professional screenwriter. I have in-depth one-to-one coaching. They can just email me, Brooks at brookselms.com, and mention, this show, and we can talk about it. And on those conversations, just I'm here to serve. And if it turns out there's something that makes sense for us to do together, cool. If not, I refer to other people, or so that's the deep dive option. And the other one's like, yeah, I like you, but I'm not so sure. Then I have a community for $5 where we actually mostly focus on taking screenplays and turn them into clips, so you can either build an audience in advance or get people to read your script. It's really fun. $5 a month, so it's a light dive. So those are two simple options, large size or the tiny size, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, wonderful. And just for the spelling of his name, you can find that in the show notes, and it'll be easy. And cool. Well, thank you so much for being here, and it's really a pleasure to get to meet you. And I'm looking forward to continued conversation.
Yeah, so much fun. Really good.
Cool. All right. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Okay, bye for now.
We're asking ancient questions. There's a story underneath the story. Lucid listens deeper. Come see the human question inside every image. Lucid listens deeper. Welcome to the new studio. Filmmaking in the age of AI.